What's up, guys? So today on the podcast, I'm going to have Bret Nowell. He is the owner or co-founder of United Solar out of Arizona. Good friend of mine. Known him for a long time. He's been in solar and security and self-development, sales. Super good stud. Follow him on Instagram. Bret with a B-R-E-T, Nowell, Nowell. Anyways, super good person to hear from, and excited to have this episode with him. So enjoy. All right, guys. So I have Bret, good friend of mine here on the podcast. Him and I connected, I think the first time through Taylor here in California.
Yeah.
First time, Palm Springs. But Bret, a good friend of mine, father of 5 now.
Yeah.
5, not 4. Yeah. Yeah, he is runs a company out of Arizona. He stellar dude when it comes to door to door. Been in the industry for a while, coming from different industries, from working with your dad to security to personal growth or development, something like to do with that, I believe, as well. Now you in solar. And yeah, stoked to have you here, man. So appreciate you for giving me that.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sasha. I really appreciate you inviting me on, and excited to just talk and even get to know you a little bit better. So I'm really excited to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, man. Yeah, so if you don't mind, run me through a little bit of who Bret is. I know a little bit from you, obviously. So you grew up in Oklahoma, right? Or born in Oklahoma.
Born in Oklahoma. I was actually born in Denver, Colorado.
Denver. Yeah, okay. I don't know why.
I don't remember much of it. I hardly even claim it. I was born there, and I moved right to Arizona like immediately after.
Right. And then so you did some schooling there, and then you guys ended up as a family in Utah, right?
Yeah. So grew up in Arizona. Started writing my now wife. When I got back from the mission, ended up moving up to Utah because that's where she was. So that's where I wanted to be. Dated, got married about 6 months later, lived there for 10 years, and then came back to the state of Arizona because that's where I was meant to be, I guess.
Yeah. No, Arizona is a sweet spot for sure. Obviously from you kind of were born in the sales family. Obviously, from what I know, your dad was a sales guy, so it kind of nursed you into being a sales guy naturally too. Obviously, after selling the gospel in Spokane, Washington. I don't know if you know that that's the place where I was adopted. I was in Yakima, so I think it might have been.
I did not know that.
My first experience of the United States was Washington, Yakima. So it's not something that you would see on TV and you're like, oh, okay, that's it. So
no.
But yeah. So you and Haley knew each other before your mission, is that right?
Yeah, just through letters. One of my buddies on the mission. You know, when you're on the mission, like if you ever have a female that you can write, you're going to take that opportunity. And so one of the buddies in the mission found out that we both had passions within wakeboarding. And he said, hey, my missionary companion is writing my sister. I don't like him too much. I like you better. So why don't you just start writing her? Yeah. So he gave me the address. I just started writing letters. And then after that, like clockwork, she just wrote me letters every single week for about a year. Every week from that point moving on. And I mean, I got to know her in and out through those letters. We were super competitive in the letters too. But that's really how we started a connection, was just writing letters every single week about what's going on in the mission. She would share about what's going on back at home. And I think through those letters, we really created a bond where when I came home, there was nobody else. I just wanted to see that girl.
This is such a cool experience for you because you obviously got to know each other on a different level. You know, typically people when they date, they go through phases of, get attracted to each other physically first, but you guys kind of got to know each other on the real perspective in letters too, not like text messages or video calls and that kind of stuff. So that's awesome. And so obviously, so you've been in the industry in general for a minute now. You got into security kind of by accident. So walk me through that a little bit. Like obviously you have to have a different mindset to do sales. How do you build that? Like what does your reinforcement look like?
Yeah, I don't know. I think sales and I think leadership kind of go hand in hand, if you ask me. I think with leadership, you're just at a little bit of a higher tier. But sales, you still have to have that weird mindset where you expect things to happen before they actually come, right? It's like the notion of faith. Like you know you're going to be a great salesman, even though you are not yet, but you're going to be that person as long as you continue to execute over and over, day in and day out. And then I think slowly over time, as you continue to move forward, the skills start to develop. You start to become better at your craft. And then the big fruits of all that labor start to finally come forth. But what everybody negates to think about is how long it truly takes to get there. Because you've heard that song, right? 10 years to be an overnight success. Like, that's so real. But still, everybody thinks, hey, I worked hard one day. Why am I not successful tomorrow? It's like you worked hard one day, which means you probably didn't work hard the other 5 or 6 days before that. You got to work hard every day of every week for like the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And then in return, you're going to see the fruits of your labor. But I think so many people just want it to happen after one day of hard work, not realizing that it just doesn't work like that. Right. And there's a lot of sacrifice involved. There's a lot of stress that's involved. There's a lot of tears that are involved. And it's just whether or not how much you're going to put yourself through that and how much pain you choose to put yourself through will dictate the outcome that you have on the other side of that story.
Yeah. Yeah. So obviously, you have to have the beliefs built from somewhere. Where did that come from for you? Because I don't think a lot of people would take a chance on themselves knowing that they have to go through a lot of trouble, especially a lot of failure. Can you hear now? Hey, Brett, can you hear me?
All right, brother, let's see if I got it reconnected here. Hopefully that fixes this problem forever. Gosh, damn it.
That's all right. That's all right. So, also, yeah. So basically, I just wanted to kind of go through with you. Obviously, so in sales, you go through headaches a lot. Obviously, I'd say more headaches than successes on most parts, but builds you as a character, and usually as you refine, you get better. So, from your perspective, obviously, where did that come from? So, I know you already knew what sales because your dad is in sales, right? And Taylor was in sales too. Um, but where did that inner belief came from you that you can do that too?
Yeah, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I think on my side, everybody has a different reason and a different why. For me, I feel like I got married a little bit younger. I feel like I had kids a little bit younger. And so I think naturally my mindset was already, hey, I don't have the luxury of just making a little bit here and there. Like I naturally have to now provide for my wife and for my boy, who at the time was like 2 years old. Right. So my sights weren't on let's just make some money and live a life. It was I have to keep climbing this mountain because I know I'm going to have another kid and another kid. I know that I want to live a life where I guess this was my initial why. It was if my wife ever needed me for any given reason whatsoever, or if I was needed at home because my boy had an emergency, I wanted to make sure that I have a life that I can up and leave and go take care of them without thinking about anything else related to work. And when I got into this life of door to door, and my first year provided me this life that I didn't know it was possible or that easy to be possible, it was like, okay, this is the vehicle I want to be on because it has now provided me that freedom to be with my family when they need me at any given moment. And that was really what propelled me year after year after year. It just kept giving me this life of flexibility to be with the family when they needed me at any moment. And that truly was my initial why to at least get me going and get me started.
Gosh, so it's more of like you had a reason. You it's the reason why you had to be who you are.
Yeah, yeah, it was a must. It wasn't like, hey, I just want this. It was like, I need to have this because that was my biggest fear always. Like, what if something happened and I couldn't be there for my kids because I had to be at work? And I think that became even more important when I was on my mission. I don't know. I think I was about 6 months in. My dad was actually swimming in the beach of California, and a wave took his legs over his head and it slammed him on his head first into the beach. And he was in that very moment paralyzed from the neck down. And I think over the next couple of years, he had to relearn how to walk. He had to relearn how to use his hands. Like he still is learning how to fall. If he falls over, he gets torn up because he doesn't know how to do it. And I remember when that happened, I saw a little bit of the struggle because his business was basically him and only him. And that I think also helps support that whole why of like, I need to make sure I have a business. Like I said, if I'm not there, I'm okay. Right. If anything happened to my wife or my kid, I can be there and I don't have to worry about me being at work because I hopefully have provided a living at that point where I have that luxury. And I say it's a luxury because I know not a lot of people have that opportunity to do that.
Yeah, 100%. No, I believe in the one thing, like I keep saying this to the guys that I have too, is like, I may not be the most talented when it comes to like sales in general, but I know I can depend on my work. Like I can
Yeah.
know that I can keep myself accountable to the standards I can set for myself. And that's like such an uplifting peace of mind that it's you and only you, right? And it comes to obviously from positive reinforcements because every time that I take a chance on myself with that belief, usually something good happens out of it. Doesn't mean that it's smooth ride, but as I go through that kind of perspective, understanding that if I do it right, things will happen, and if things happen along the way, it can be corrected, it can be refined, but I'm gonna get to where I'm trying to get to.
Yeah. I think what you said is pretty cool too, because that ability to trust yourself to do the work, not everybody has that ability. Everybody has the opportunity, but not everybody has that ability. Because people think like, oh, this guy just says what he's gonna do and he does it. What they don't realize is having that ability truly has taken practice over time. Where you say you're gonna go on a run, you're gonna do it no matter how you feel, right? You say you're gonna go to the gym, you're gonna do it no matter what. You say you're gonna go knock doors, you're going to do that no matter what. And that ability just isn't there. You have to train yourself to do it because that is a diminishing skill. You either use it and you continue to focus on it like you would your muscles at the gym, or slowly over time, you become a guy that doesn't trust your own word, and which in return also reflects by showing your lack of confidence too. Like that to me is one of the craziest things I learned a while back is that that is truly a skill that needs to be honed. It's not a skill that you just get to have because you say that you want to have it.
Yeah, exactly. It's that, yeah, I wish, and all of a sudden it comes to intuition, right?
Yeah.
Comes a lot of work. So the one thing is obviously you have a pretty cool proof record. You work with your dad and did a really good job there. Opportunity fell in the lap to transition industries, which you tried to do that from Utah. Then you start to hop around to Idaho, I believe, right? Tried to do some sales there with your brother, and then you just took off. You and Taylor just kind of start running the sales security side of it. So you start setting records and getting Golden Door awards and all that stuff. Like, what do you think? What was like? How did that came into fruition for you? So obviously through work and persistency. But what do you think would help you to adjust here to kind of get to those levels and continue reaching something that a lot of people stop at?
Yeah. I don't know. One thing you said I thought was interesting though. You said the word take off, right? I think if you look fast forward like 5, 10, 12 years, right, it may appear took off might be the right word. But like if you were to sit down with me and Taylor, like taking off is like the opposite word I would honestly use. Because what people don't know is that we had a lot of blitz trips before our even first summer where we only sold maybe 4 to 5 accounts in a week, right? And we were spending money flying out to Houston. We were spending money in hotels. We brought 1 or 2 friends with us that just thought it sounded like a good idea, right? I remember even after our first year, I think I did 130 accounts and I felt like the man. Well, our very first blitz right after that summer, I sold 1 account the entire week. And it wasn't like I went and sold 4 hours a day. It was we knocked from 8:30 in the morning till like 11 o'clock at night. And every day I was bageling, and every morning I'd wake up and say, "Doesn't matter, I'm gonna have another great day. I'm gonna go find myself 3 or 4 accounts." And it's because I just remembered the results of the last summer, but I was forgetting the work that I had to put in to get there. And that work has to be replicated every single week that you go do the exact same job. So if I really look over the span of like the last 10 or 12 years, it's just been a compilation of adjustments, right? Like I think the first year it was all hard work because that's all I really knew. I didn't really know the skill set. I didn't really know the mindset. I didn't know the tricks that everyone had. So my only strength was I guess I have to work harder than everybody else that's in the room, right? I got what I got. That next year it was how do now I know I can work hard. How do I work a little bit smarter? And that was year 2. Year 3 was like, how do I work more efficiently and more effectively? Right. Then I met with our guy, Jake Eldredge. He gave me the rule book there. I'm like, okay, let's just copy that. And then every year, because there was a new focus that needed attention, because of that, we were able to grow a little bit more and a little bit more. But we never had like a grand vision of like, this is where we want to be. We just always wanted to be improving year after year after year, which we did for a long time, right? It was like our personal accounts were growing, our team accounts doubled. I don't know, for the first like 4 or 5 years, we did like 400 our first year, 800, 1600, 32. Like it just compiled year after year after year. But every year, there's a little bit of a different focus as to how to improve ourselves and or how to improve the team that was below us. But it's constant pivoting. I mean, it's nonstop adjusting. Like
Yeah,
that's all the.
I mean, that's what I mean by take off. I don't think it's an overnight success. I understand the story of the whole thing built, but it is pretty amazing to see. Like you were, selling from 130, and I think you end up with like, what was it, 426? I remember you and your brothers. Cool thing is that you have a bond of brothers that kind of locked in on the same vision with you guys. I think all of you guys
every Nowell brother is a Golden Door winner at this point.
Yeah, dude, I remember the shirts that you guys posted with, and it was like I think either all of you or I think almost all of you guys got over 400 accounts that month, right? Brock was like,
you did, yeah.
Was Brock almost at 600 or something like that crazy?
No, Taylor that year crushed it. I think Taylor did like 520. I did 430 or 440 that year. I think Brock did 420, something like that. But we all did 400 plus, and Taylor just knocked it out of the park that year.
Yeah. So I remember. I mean, it's very unheard of. Like 130, that's like a good pat on the back for the industry in general. The fact that you guys pushed that bond and together too. That's the other thing that's like so important. So I had an opportunity to work with my brother, and it was rough. Part of it because sometimes you run into people that you want them to succeed more than they want for themselves, and it's like an uphill battle a lot of times.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we had to part ways where he ended up doing his own thing, and now I'm still doing what I'm doing. You had a fallout with Taylor too.
Mm-hmm.
That naturally happened, right? Which was, from what I heard, it was like painful experience.
Yeah, it was. It was super painful.
And seeing you guys recently on social media, him running 100-mile, like seeing the brotherhood and you being there for him to support him, like it's a super big step from what I understand.
Yeah.
How did that experience teach you to be better in that, like take care of more relationships? Not necessarily just a brother, but in general in business. How do you nourish those relationships to avoid fallouts? I guess if there's a way.
How do you nourish those relationships to avoid fallout? I think it's a tough one because I think I've always had like this care for people, for sure. But when me and Taylor had that fallout, it definitely caused a lot of like self-reflection. It went through stages, right? At first I was just extremely mad at him, right? He was extremely mad at me. I don't think we spoke to each other for like the first year, maybe a text or two at max, but we didn't talk to each other at all. And there was just an immense amount of resentment from me to him and from him to me. And I think there's a reality check there that we both have a different understanding of the reality of that situation, right? What I saw, what I felt was my reality. What he saw, what he felt was his reality. So who's to say who's right and who's wrong, right? There is no right, there is no wrong. There's just his perspective and there's my perspective. And I think after really going through that whole thing and thinking it all through, I had this reality check that there is no right and there is no wrong. There's just different realities that everyone sees from different sides. And so now if I ever have like a conflict of any sort, which it happens still all the time, right, in different areas of your life, instead of me being reactive and just being upset, as long as I'm able to keep my head level, I get to really think through like their eyes. Like, why do you think they would think that? Like, how do you think that makes them feel? No matter what I think about it, how do you think that makes them feel? How do you think they're reacting to it? Why do you think they're reacting to it? And I think if you're able to keep a level head and really think from the perspective of somebody else, you have a reality check that you're not right, they're not right. You both just have different takes on the subject, and you have to be empathetic to what they're thinking to some degree, to if you want to keep that relationship alive. And now, like, if you talk to Taylor, I'm sure he'd have a very similar conversation where I was not the right one, I was not the wrong one. We both just were not in the right space. And reality is now is like I'm super happy that it happened because we had a great relationship, but it was a relationship that was built with little steps of resentment along the way. And it just got to a breaking point where we both just couldn't do it anymore. But now that we've kind of slowly come together, we have no work related to our relationship. It's just an actual brotherhood. We're like, I'm super excited about the things that he does in his life. Like, he's super excited about the things I'm doing in my life. Like, we now will talk about work, and I'll help him and he'll help me. Right? Him even asking me to help him with that 100-mile run meant the world to me. And I actually, the first time, told him, hell yeah, bro, I'll come and pace you. And reality is, I actually broke my leg like 6, 8 months ago. I can barely run as it is. Then I had to call him up and be like, hey, dude, I don't even know why I said yes. Like, I can't do it. Like, I won't do it. But then I felt like such a bitch, for lack of a better word, that I called him up again. And I even told my wife, I'm like, I'm not going to run with them. I clearly can't do it. But then I felt that way and I called him up again. I was like, hey, like, forget everything I said. I'll do whatever I can. I just want to be able to support you. And I actually didn't even run with them. Like, I just didn't. I took him the last like 3 miles from where he ended to the race. And Taylor was so dead exhausted he couldn't run anyway. So I basically just walked him from that point to the finish line. But to both of us, it was such a special moment because, you know, I I'm the older brother. I feel like I supported him a lot over the years of door to door, but I'd be crazy to think that he wasn't supporting me through hard times too. But we had a lot of special moments where like he couldn't walk. He put his hand over my shoulder and I was able to carry him right down these roads to help him get to the finish line. And to both of us, it was, I don't know, it was kind of just symbolic of us kind of coming back together and then getting through the finish line together. And to us, that's what it was really all about. It wasn't about just running with them for X amount of miles. It wasn't, for me, it wasn't about the 100 miles. It was about just supporting Taylor through the finish line of something that he did on his own. And two brothers that came together after they resolved their issues. And truly, like, our relationship is probably more special than it ever has been before.
Yeah, that's how it felt. You guys have a beautiful picture of that too. It captured.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Definitely an emotional kind of thing just to think through.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I'm a guy that on the sideline. I know Taylor. We served a mission together. That's how we got introduced to you after.
Yeah.
I do want to take a credit for the time we did Blitz in Palm Springs, and you had to go and learn how solar approach was. I don't,
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if you remember us knocking together or not.
Oh, I remember us knocking in California.
Yeah. Super hot day too. But yeah, the main thing is so obviously this is sometimes I do believe that like life has to have this contrast, right? For you to recognize the need of relationship with your brother for maybe different steps in growth in the business perspective, because not everybody can be aligned, and I think the contrast is a beautiful thing that kind of teaches us a lot. But also the intent of the mindset, like I do believe in manifesting a lot, right? So if we can manifest good things or bad things, whichever one you attract yourself to. And I think a lot of times, like in business or in family too, that alignment of positive has to be on all sides, right? So, like obviously, Haley has her handful with
Yes, she does, man. Holy cow.
and Cash is killing it on BMX and obviously keeps her busy, and hopefully he's doing well, by the way. But how do you guys have the alignment from a family perspective where she knows, in a sense, a role of give the kids everything you need while dad is out, and dad can substitute, and she can take care of herself. Like, how do you guys align that internally as a family? Like, what do you guys do?
I think it's just a lot of conversation and understanding. I really do, because like you know as well as I do, in this game, like there takes some sacrifice if you really want to get what you want out of this gig. And I think it obviously helped because her dad growing up, he had to travel for work to make the money that they made. And they lived a great life growing up. So she just knew, hey, if we want to live a good life, like travel may just be a part of it. Right. And so that was never a big issue. Plus, my dad traveled a lot when I was growing up. But even though my dad traveled a lot growing up, he still showed up for all of my gigs. He was my coach for half the things that I did, for baseball to soccer, and so I think we both had this perspective of how it can work and how it can make sense. And we both knew that that was a part of just living a life greater than what we would have had if we weren't traveling, or the hardship to come along with that. So I think that helped, just having that base understanding. But at the same time, like as life goes on, it doesn't last like that forever, right? Like my travel schedule with having just cash was a lot easier than it is now having 5 kids, because as they grow up, they have more events, they have more activities, right? And then I also started to realize in the last couple of years, like my kids fully expect me to be there for their events. And though they may have 15 of those throughout the year, I can look at them and be like, we have 15 of those events, but what they remember is every event is just as important as the next event, right? And I feel it and I realize it when I go to my girls' dance thing. Like they sincerely appreciate it when I'm there and I show up, whether I know what the hell they're doing or not. Like half the moves, I have no idea what they're called, but I'm blown away when I see my girls dance. I am blown away that they learned how to make their bodies move the way they move and bend. Like I can't comprehend it. I'm the furthest thing from being flexible, so it's mind blowing to me. But over time, like that mindset of like sacrifice, you have to change what that sacrifice looks like, right? Like now, sometimes I have to sacrifice my work to be there for my kids. And sometimes when the need's there, I have to sacrifice what's going on with my family to be there for work. And so now it's sometimes a juggling act of figuring out what I'm missing, what I'm going to, the importance of each one. And sometimes I have to let my partners down a little bit, and sometimes I unfortunately have to let down my kids a little bit. But it never happens without a real conversation about why I'm doing what I'm doing it. And sacrifice just looks different every couple of years because the family dynamic is different also, but it doesn't happen without communication, right? Communication is key.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. So like, Steven and I've been married for 10 years. She married me when I was jumping every summer. We did one summer
Oh
sales.
yeah.
We did summer sales in North Georgia. She went out to Georgia. She hated the whole thing. Breaking the Red Bull in your head, getting run up, and then go out and you not see each other. You
Yeah.
just got married.
Oh yeah.
So, matter of fact, when I transferred to do solar, I had to leave her in Utah. While I moved to California by myself, she was still going through school. We had to figure it out if it was going to work. But she recognized like that was something I was very passionate and directed with, like initially, because I personally don't know still why she believed me and still does. Obviously now, like you said, over time it kind of easier to believe in what you're doing if it's you have the record of things happening, intuition. But in the beginning, man, it was rough road. That's even before the kids. So,
Yeah.
but I listened to the podcast by Tyler called Electric People, and he talked about there's 3 stages of the reps. Right, so the beginning reps focus a lot on the volume. They're gone a lot. They're pushing the pace. They're working those crazy hours and not showing up. Then, as you get experience, you get a time to kind of strategize. So the hours you start to kind of like refining. Okay, what's better, what's working, what's not working, and you kind of starts to shape. And then the last one is a mindset, where you experience, you know the what needs to be done. Now you have to make sure you stay locked in and you know guarding your mind with things that can reinforce what you need to do.
Yeah.
What helps you? Because I know you're part of what we are they. You and Taylor, obviously. So there's a bond of brotherhood there that helps you. You have a strong partner, Jordan, and brother, obviously there too.
Yeah.
Haley's on board 100%, obviously, I assume.
Yep.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
how do you manage that reinforcement and kind of feed that to make sure that everybody knows their role and it just functions?
So how does everybody know their role, and how do I know it functions on the work side, the family side? And I don't know. I think like anything, everything's always going to be communication based, right? If you don't talk about it, then there's a lot of thoughts, and thoughts can go to a very dark place really quick. Because as humans, that's pretty natural. Um, so I think it's just a lot of communication. I don't know if there's a magical answer for that, for me at least. I'd be curious to hear what you say too, because you have a lot of stuff that you juggle also. But for me, it always seems to be communication. And I will say I'm pretty blessed in that side. Haley and I never really get in like arguments really bad. I mean, I think our weakness is that we don't want to talk about it right away, but that also becomes our strength. Because we don't talk about it right away, we're not reactive. So instead, we might take 6 to 8 hours being quiet towards one another, but because we're thinking about what I'm about to say, what is she going to say? Should I say that? Is that a good idea? And then after the time is kind of slowed down, then we'll eventually go to talk about it, but we're not ever yelling at each other, right? We're never raising our voices. Like we just kind of come together like, hey, I've self-reflected. And usually it's one of us actually apologizing because we realize, okay, we both played a role in this. It wasn't just one way or the other. And I will say we're probably a little bit better at that on the family side than the work side. On the work side, we maybe get a little reactive, but usually we're locked up in a room, so we're forced to talk about it anyway.
Yeah, yeah. So from my perspective, I've learned one thing: don't draw conclusion. I think a lot of times we draw conclusions too fast, and that relates to family. That relates to from family. It's really easy to say I'm right and have that ego, right? And she's wrong, and sometimes you have a point to prove. So one, don't draw the conclusion. So for us, like agree to disagree. That's always is going to happen for her and I.
Sure.
And in work too. Like I understand that the process to get somewhere may require for me to get some wounds that I have to lick along the way to refine myself and get better.
Yeah.
And second thing is expectation. I think like she knows sometimes if my expectation of myself is too much or of her and family is too much. Like if she knows sometimes that okay, we're having a blitz, I'm gonna be gone for 10 days straight, but I have minimal conversation. At the end of the day, she needs to be okay with that expectation too. And I think alignment with that, with at least with us as a family, helps a lot to have that mutual understanding and then having alignment in schedule and priorities in versus the need, right? The standards of what's really important, why we're doing this versus what needs to be done. And just going out to work doesn't mean they're actually being productive too. So,
yeah. And I think with that being said, I feel like over time I've gotten worse. When I first would travel, I'd call Haley every night, talk to her about what's going on. I think over time, I mean, it is true. You get busier, but it really comes down to your priorities, right? Like I have time to make my call home to Haley if I really want to make that time, right? I at any point could just tell all the guys, hey, don't talk to me. I'm leaving for half an hour, and I can make the call. And I still think even some trips I do better. Some trips I don't do as well. Some trips, it's just the realities of the situation. Like I'm driving everywhere. And, Haley and I have had talks about that too. Like I'm not in front of these sales guys where I get to have these one-on-one conversations all the time because there's 20 guys around you, 30 guys around you at all times. Sometimes Haley understands, hey, I'm here to be here with these guys because they need my time. Like that's why I'm traveling out here is to be present with these individuals, right? And if you're not, they build resentment around that too. But I do think a lot of that too comes down to like agreements that you make that the other person didn't agree to either, right? Like how often do we get upset with people that they didn't do something that you wanted them to do? But it's not like you had a conversation about it. You just have this natural expectation that they should be doing that, though they never agreed to it in the first place. And I think that's what creates a lot of arguments too. It's like, you can't just make me sign this contract I didn't sign. Like, let's have the conversation first and discuss it, and then we can move along.
yeah. And I mean, and that's part of including with sales guys, right? So I know the one of the calls I actually stole that from you. Yeah, I loved when you jumped. One of you guys was interviewing somebody on the phone, and he just jumped in and said, "Hey, listen, if you're not willing to make above this amount, I don't want you anyway." I was like, dude, what a powerful move, come in and just do that. Because a lot of times, like I feel like in our industry, and you can attest to this, people surround themselves with anything just to look good, right? So that we have 400 people, we have 100 people in the roster, whatever. But when it comes down to, the individual doesn't matter as much. And from the way you guys are growing now in Utah, it seems like in Arizona, it seems like you guys do that approach more of like, let's add to make us better rather than add to just to make us bigger. Is that am I feeling it right?
Well, yeah, and we kind of get that concept from the security days, right? Security, we were never a team that had like 100 people. We were the team that had 20 people, but we would do the exact same volume as a group that had 100. And, I think solar, honestly, can be a lot more expensive. There's a lot more costs that are involved than it was in the security days, which makes it even more important that we have no need to have a body that fills a chair that we have to get swag out to. We want to make sure that if there's a body in that chair, that body is producing, one, for that person so they actually make money to live, two, so that person can also be a marketing human that will invite other people to do this, because if they're not, they're spreading verbiage that's not going to benefit the org as a whole anyway. So shouldn't you be more careful about bringing people in? Because word of mouth is so powerful at this point anyway. Like, I want to have more people talking highly of us than we do people talking poorly of us. So the expectation has to be set from the beginning.
Yeah, the one thing that I don't know if you can relate. I have a hard time sometimes let myself not care. And when it comes to hiring, when I got into the industry, I came off the mission, broke as a joke, got to Utah, realized that tuition was so expensive. No way I'm going to take a loan to go to school. And a buddy from my mission knew me, so that's the only reason I got a chance to go to do solar pest control sales with a $500 bonus to drive to North Carolina. So sometimes, yeah. So sometimes, man, I take that perspective. Sometimes I meet people and I know, based on the paper, they may not suit the job, but so the gut feeling sometimes like, well, what would that person do if the same opportunity was given to them as it was to me, right? And I misread a lot of those situations. Let's put it this way. I ran into a situation where I've created an environment of cancer where people were just, just bickering, and it got to the point where it ate up my whole team and I had to start over again. And now I'm like in a position like, do I do it again? Because like, you like it or not, that does influence everything that you were building up to this point, including your family and sacrifices you made up to this point. So the question always like, is it worth to go through that again? But I think the perspective that I have helps me to fall and try again, and helps to fall and try again and just keep going, because I know the end of the day, and you and I probably know too, we don't need a big team to make good money for our families. But what it's more about, it's about to enhance the lives of people that you surround yourself with along the community also, which a lot of times in our industry with as much money as we make, it's really easy to make it all about the money. Really easy to make it about pampering the reps, but not so much about take care of the people that we serve in the areas that we work in, right?
Yeah,
it has a certain
really well said.
Yeah, I think it's like certain pride in it. So that's, for me at least, it's like why I'm trying to find those golden geese. I don't have my brothers that can which I do have 5 brothers, but I wouldn't necessarily invite them to.
Oh, no way. I didn't know you had 5 brothers. Holy cow.
Yeah, because I was adopted in the family of 12. So coming from Ukraine, I have 2 sisters, brother, and I were adopted to American family that was assembled by 5 families. So I was the second oldest of 12. So I was kind of given this brotherhood. So I have 5 brothers, 7 sisters. They're all still in Washington State. I'm the only one that kind of ventured off after my mission, right after.
You're the black sheep.
Yeah, big time. Yeah. But the main thing for me is like what I've been, and the thing is, the one thing that stood out to me about you, Brad, is that when I remember one time you made a post about this, and you talked about one of the installers did not want to work with you because you were all about the family, not about solar.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about that. Like that decision, obviously that had to do with moving the business too, right? Because from that point on, I think you were still, United was not in existence at that point. How did that shape you into who you are? Even though you're like, you got that nasty feedback from somebody that I don't want to work with you because
What are you referring to again, just so I answer this right?
Yeah, so basically what happened, I don't know, it's been a couple of years ago, but it's you made a post about somebody was trying to be your installer, and they looked at your social media and they said that you were not enough solar guy, you were about family.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know if they,
You're actually talking about a recruit that we're bringing on. I know you're talking about.
Yeah. So I don't know if it was a decision to find an installer and he did not like the fact that you were not promoting solar enough, or what was the situation. But I love what you said after that. It's like family is first priority, and that's I do what I do because of my family, right? So, and if somebody doesn't like it, kind of see ya, right?
Yeah.
But I think from that point on, it's kind of like we're, in other words, of takeoff again. Maybe the load of pleasing everybody else and try to be in the business and with everybody versus like I'm gonna align with people who I need to align with in order to support.
Yeah. I don't know. I think when you grow up in your 20s, right, like you're okay to have all sorts of different types of friends, all different types of people around you. Like you don't have the compass that you have when you're older, so you're just kind of open funnel, welcoming. You just want to have friends. I think as you get older, right, you realize that it doesn't matter about how many friends you have; it matters about how many people truly have your back when you're not in the room. And I think that really ties into solar or work in general, where you don't want to work with people that are just only about the money. And you realize that money is the least important thing, and the money will come when you do the work. So instead, you want to surround yourself with the people that have the same values that you have, right? And at this point, that's how I live my life in general. Like, I don't mess with everybody, and that's okay. I want to mess with the people that have the same values that have the same talk trick that I have, that, and more importantly, when I'm out in the room, they're talking highly about my name. That's what I want. Because everything else, like money, is probably the least important thing you can have in your life. Because there's people in this world that have tons of money and are very, very unhappy, right? And I always want to make sure that in my life, whether I have money or not, I'm happy. And that's always going to be based around the people that are around you. And I think in that conversation, I don't think it was an installer. I think it was just a guy that wanted to come over, that I think he worked with an MLM company, but he was a huge name. He had a huge network, and he did not like the conversation of how it went because we talked more about, family and relationships more than we talked about solar, and he didn't like it. And I was like, well, what else is there out there? Like, reality is, if you don't like me and I don't like you, it doesn't matter how much money we make, we're not going to have any fun doing it, right? And that's where it's like, I want to align myself with people that have the same values, that want the same things. Money is a complete secondary thing to even discuss.
Yeah, the thing is, money will come on its own, like you said before. I think if you do the right thing for the right reason, it just naturally is part of that, right?
Oh yeah.
I had a very similar situation too. I've kind of hopped around. I don't have partners, right? So I'm kind of like, my wife and I is a aligned partner with it. She's my voice of reason. Let's put it this way.
Yeah, for sure.
And as I'm going through this conversation with her, and every time obviously you come home, you kind of just puke out the information. Here's my day today. Then you try to soak in some from her, but we're talking, and I brought this couple of guys who are experienced, and I believe their story of everybody else sucked. I'm so precious. Nobody cares for me. Nobody recognizes me. I want a room for growth, and I want to be a part of a company that can recognize that. I was like, okay, cool. We had one problem initially when I switched the payroll company without letting everybody know yet, right? So I was just like going through. And we had this nasty phone conversation with this new guys. And my wife was in the other room listening to the whole thing. And she saw how I handled the situation. And I was super nice and polite about this, even though there's, language involved and all that stuff. Physically, I wanted to take their hands and just squeeze it enough so the eyes pop out. But I did not do that. Instead of learning, I'm like, you know what? There are some people that don't align with what you're trying to do. And that's totally fine. And at that point, we cut off the relationship. Guys were out doing their own thing, working for somebody else. I don't know what they're doing now. But we passed on those guys and moved on to something different. And I think it was a valuable lesson to learn, at least from my perspective, because you go through the situations where it either destroys you or reinforces you. And that was a huge part of reinforcement for me, to know that there are certain types of people that I have to avoid moving forward if I want to get anywhere.
Yeah.
But from your perspective, what advice would you give someone looking into the industry, either for themselves or to bring somebody in their company, how to catch those things beforehand, so that it doesn't turn into one of those nasty experiences working for somebody, or somebody is not what I thought they were, or they overpromised and they delivered? Like, what advice would you give somebody who trying to do it for the right reason? Let's put it this way.
Yeah, I don't know. I think some people can be so deceitful, right? Like the crazy thing about this game is there's so many sales. Like everyone's a salesperson within the door-to-door space, and so even when we talk to companies, we'd always prefer to talk to like the technician or like the person that's over tech more than we would than talking to like the VP of sales, right? Because they're always going to tell you what's good, what's great, and they always try to pre-frame everything to make sure it looks the way that it needs to look. When reality is like you already know not everything's perfect, right? If you've ever been a part of any org, no matter how big or small, you know nothing's perfect. Like there's always gaps, there's always holes. So what you'd rather know is, hey, I know things are going great, and I know you have things that you're working on. Tell me the things that you're working on, because I don't have a problem that things aren't perfect, but I do have a problem when you tell me they're perfect, and I get so deep into it, and then I see the holes that were there the whole time, but you didn't tell me until I figured it out, right? So I think it's a hard question to answer, but the best thing I would always say is what we tell our guys here is if people want to come into our org, I always tell them, hey, dude, despite the pay scale, despite the overrides, no matter what it is we can pay you, why don't you come into the office, hang out with the guys here, talk to them, get to know them, and decide if you even like us first. If you like us, then let's talk about all the things that you think are important to you. Because if you don't like us, this isn't going to last anyway, right? Like you're going to become the people that you're around most. And if you don't like the people that you're going to be around a lot, then you probably should go somewhere else anyway. Because reality is, right, if you want to get to know somebody, go hang out with them a few times, right? Like, hang out with them when the times are good and hang out with them when the times are a little bit bad. Because the fun part is when you hang out with people and things are rough, you really get to see who they are. And that's why like summer is such a crazy experience, because you get to meet everybody at all the highest of highs and lowest of lows. And after that summer, you're either knit tight with some of the guys, or you're like, dude, I don't want to be near you at any given moment because you're just toxic, and you don't know it until you go through all those different phases of being with them. So I don't know if I have any great advice on that other than just hang out with them a few times. Don't be too quick to make any decision. Go hang out with the people that you're going to work with to see if these are truly people that you want to be around, because the financial component is going to be the smallest piece that's really important to you. What's really important to you is the character of the people that you're working with. That to me is going to be the most important thing no matter what.
Yeah. I was going to touch on that. So I think the part of growth, I think you're as strong as your weakest link, right? So a lot of times, like, you probably get more feedback from people who are not doing so well versus those who do well. And the other part of it too, like the standards, right? So a lot of times I can see at least from right now, I have like over last week got 320 applications from Indeed, and I look at this.
Nice.
Yeah, great amount of numbers, but
a lot of applications.
But I'm looking as I'm starting to sift through, because I know my standard, right? It's really easy to make a decision who's going to work with you and who's not going to work with you. And second thing is when you put them in a group and you can see when the tough questions come up, how they handle if the standards change, right? With you guys, like, I assume positivity is part of your standard. Like, how do you guys implement that? So I know you do a lot for the guys, like you do the breath works and exercise together, cold plunges and all that kind of stuff. Like, how do you guys create a culture of that positive reinforcement, but also feedback? Like, so you don't get hurt as a leader, take offense in the feedback that you're getting.
Yeah, I think all that stuff is always going to start from the top down, right? Like the way that we communicate to each other as partners, like if we don't do something, we just call it out and say that we don't do it, right? We never even have to call out the other partner because they're going to say it first, hey, I screwed up, I dropped the ball, it didn't happen, right? And when we do that to, say, our regional or our DMs, it's the exact same conversation. If we tell them we're going to do something and we don't do it, we don't need them to come tell us. We'll go to them first and say, hey, look, I dropped the ball, I screwed up, I didn't do it, right? And if we all do that from the top down, from ownership down to regional, down to the DM, down to the setter leader, it drips all the way down to the rep. And like if you're around any of us, if you come to anybody in our team, I don't care who you are, and you start to complain about something that's going on, it's immediately disgusting to hear because they don't want to hear about the things that are wrong. What do you want to hear, right? Just tell me some solutions. If you don't like it, tell me the solution. And that's ultimately what's so great about the whole we are the they group, right? Like that's Jimmy's big thing, is that if you want something fixed, if you don't like the way that something's going, you don't complain and just go, who's going to fix it, right? The person that's going to fix it is you. And that's what it comes from, right? It's like we are the they. If you want something resolved, it starts with you. Just start doing it. And so when there's a person on the team complaining about anything, whatever it might be, it's, dude, I don't want to hear your complaints. Tell me what the problem is. Tell me what the solutions are. And then let's go solve the problem. Because complaining gets you nowhere anyway, right? Have you ever heard the saying, like, complaining like a rocking horse? It's fun to do, but it gets you nowhere. Like, it's just there's literally zero purpose to complain or bitch. It does nothing for anybody. But you know what's great is when you do have conflict, if you do handle it the right way, you come up with a solution that helps a lot more people. And so there's a thing I just read in a book called Rocket Fuel. I don't know if you ever heard that book, but they have a thing. It's called IDS. It's identify, discuss, and then solve. So identify the problem. Let's discuss what's going on here and solutions, and then let's solve the problem. And that's probably the great thing about conflict in general is that anytime you have a conflict, anytime you have an issue, it's an opportunity to build something even better. But everything that we have within our culture, like you won't hear a whole lot of complaining, a whole lot of bitching because we have processes for it. We have Wednesdays every Wednesday we have a meeting with all of our DMs and setter leaders where we bring up any topics that need to be discussed, anything that needs to be solved, and we handle it all in that room. But bitching and complaining is not a part of our culture, but problem solving is.
So the toughest thing that I've ran into, and thanks for sharing it, by the way. Sometimes it's really hard to get rid of people, right? Because you attach yourself for a person. It's like you have probably amount of people in your group probably too. You're like, outside of work, I would invite you to my family's events. I would spend more time with you one-on-one. Absolutely would love that. But they may be also terrible sales guys. So how do you balance that relationship and business without harming the relationship? I would say in that sense too.
I don't know. We tell all of our guys that the personal development is more important than the sales. Like I would take somebody that's crappy at sales, but it's great for the culture over somebody that's great at sales and they're terrible for culture, right? Because terrible for culture hurts a lot more people. And so, you know, we'll always have at least one or two people sometimes where they're not the top performers at the moment, but we'll keep them on because that is what we're about, right? We're not about just the money. We're about developing the person to be a better version of themselves. It's a part of our mission statement, right? It's a part of our talk track around the room. If there's somebody that's struggling in the group, we'll send a message to every DM and setter leader and say, hey, reach out to this guy. He needs support. He needs love. He needs a friend, whatever. And everybody does it. And sometimes I'll get a text from the individual. They're like, did you just have everybody message me? I'm like, absolutely, bro. Like, we miss you. Like, we want to make sure you're doing well. But then there does have to come to a point at some point in time where you have to let them go because, once again, you're trying to do what's best for them, right? They came into the org because they wanted something better for themselves, and you have a ship that can create the dynamic. But sometimes, like we talked about, like work ethic, that's a skill that has to be worked on nonstop. If they don't yet have that skill and you cannot get them to work on that skill, eventually they're going to be in the culture and love the people so much because they got all these new friends. They're around people that make them better. They have a hard time leaving. And that's the only point where it's like, all right, we've helped you. We've done everything possible, but you're not doing it for yourself. Now the next best thing we can do for you is to let you go. Because the last thing I want you to do is broke and need money and not have it. And I don't want you to be broke by choice just because you love to be around the right people. At some point, being around all the greatest people in the world is not going to change your dynamic until you literally choose to do that for yourself and on your own. And that's what we tell people in our group is we're not trying to let people go because we don't like them. We're letting them go to put them in a better place because they may not be ready for this group. They may not be ready for this culture because there isn't a lot of hand-holding here, right? It's like we have a lot of compassion, but it's also very disciplined as well. You either work or you don't work. You're either here or you're out. There's not 1 foot in, 1 foot out.
Yeah, because the engagement part of it can kind of tell you, right? If you're approaching the right person or you're progressing with the right person, if they engaged and they're progressing in that, and it's really easy to kind of replicate the effort part of it. Results can come after. Sometimes, like an example, my first day in sales on door to doors, I was getting my face kicked in until 9 o'clock. Like I was working, I did not take any breaks. It was brutal, man.
Glory days.
Yeah, that's in the times when you get dropped off and that's it, right? So, but I would refuse to get picked up because, like, I believe that there are supposed to be sales. I hear all the stories and that's not happening for me. So, like, I did not deserve to take a break yet. So that was my inner belief initially.
I love that.
And then when I got to the point where it's like, okay, I'm getting picked up. I have 3 guys in the car already waiting. I finally find this golden goose. Had a party going on, and he has massive pest control issues, and he was looking for somebody to do it. And like finally I didn't know how to sign contract, nothing. I just found somebody to come in and help me with the whole thing. But the effort paid off in the end because I stayed out with it with that same mentality. The main thing is I think at least in my situation right now, like I can tell if somebody really wants it or kind of wants it. I listened to Todd Peterson recently had a podcast, and he talked about how new generation is missing the joy of hard work. And I thought it was so interesting, right? Like you can probably resonate. Back in the days, first of all, when people were finding success, they were not sharing it as they are now. You have social media tells you about everything, podcasts like this one too. So the resources are always there. It's the effort to find the things that can make you better, what's going to require to improve. And that's kind of interesting for me, at least, to see if people really want it, they'll make it work, regardless if it's a good company, bad company for themselves, because it is based on you too.
It's all on you. That's the thing is like any company can, like back when I started door to doors in 2013, that's when they just started rolling out like apps, right? Before that, people had like sheets. I know some guys were taking chalk and making chalk marks on the sidewalks. And like, that's the coolest part is when you look back, like those, to us, at least to me, those were the glory days. Like the hard work, working all day till you get one to like the very last door of the night, you know, or getting one deal in the beginning and then getting nothing the rest of the day, but you just keep going because you have this weird ass mindset thinking that the next door is going to be your deal at every single door, and it never happens, but you just keep thinking it's going to happen. And like those to me are the best days I can remember, because later on, like that like mindset isn't entirely there anymore because you become so much more efficient and you become so much more systematic, where it's not about fighting and grinding to get the one. It's just how can I work smarter to get, you know, go from 4 deals to 6 deals a day, or 6 deals to 7 deals a day. Like the glory days were the hard ass days that you had to bust your ass. And I remember my wife used to call me too and be like, did you get anything today? I'd go home and report, I got 1 today. Like I got 1, I got 3. But then it got to the point where you start to sell enough and so many where she doesn't ask you how many you sell anymore. She just knows that you're bringing the money in because you know what you're doing. And like I really do. I love and miss those days of getting that phone call being like, did you get a deal today? Because you just knew the work that was going into it. Like how fucking fun was that? Those are the best days ever.
Well, the thing is too, like talking about family, you know, your why was started with your family. You had to perform because of what's at stake at home. You can't come home folding knowing what you could offer to people and you didn't do it. Like it just mentally just like it's not there, right? So like even today, like I could work all days and I cannot afford come home missing on everything that was going on at home and saying I'll try tomorrow. Like it doesn't happen. And
No.
the thing is like it's a mindset part of it. That's why I love, like the reason I started this podcast, because I'm like, there's so many people go through hell on earth, but yet they found the triumph times where they can become better, and people don't hear about those stories, and all they think is like people take off randomly, not hear the stories. I'm like, like, and then hear your story, like how you still refine and you deal with reps who don't align and reps who are in bought in, and it takes some time to get progressed, and obviously with your family still supporting you with this crazy journey that we cursed with. Obviously now having the job that you have, you cannot afford going somewhere else and trying to work for somebody or do anything different. Like it's just, there's a beautiful thing in that too. So,
and I really like and appreciate all that too, because I think you always got to remember like why you're doing it, right? Like I really clearly remember my first summer being out in Houston and working, and my wife and my boy finally being out there with us for the full summer. I think they came out midway through. And I remember my wife was fully pregnant, I believe, with our second Harley. And dude, she was sick. Like she'd call me at like 8 o'clock at night, be like, I'm bent over the toilet throwing up right now. And I'm like, well, I'm out here, and if I'm not gonna be home with her, like I better be working my ass off, because my wife is going through it, and I'm not there to be there for her and to comfort her, So I have to do this work. And then there's the other side of it too, which is like even in my last podcast, like getting a little, congratulated for how well we're doing. And it's cool. I feel good that we're doing well, but I almost feel like a con artist even celebrating it, because there's people that are doing way better than I am. And the other reality is that there's no top anyway. So like you cannot not like the journey, because you're always and continually on this journey. The journey never stops, right? Like there's millionaires, there's billionaires, there's soon to be trillionaires. Like it doesn't stop. So there is no reason to celebrate where you're at. You just have to be thankful for where you're at in the journey, because the journey is what we're always on, and that's where we're always going to be. The journey is endless and forever. You're always working on something. And so I think you've really got to be thankful for the journey that you're on, because you're never ending. You're always going to be on that path of the journey itself. And it looks like this, right? Like, so
it's going up the hill though. That's the thing. It's like sometimes, you have those deep valleys too, but it is, looking back, I'm sure you can recognize like I'm an up and up still. Like it.
Yeah. And even then the dips are what help you go up anyway, because without the dip, you don't know how to restructure. You don't know what lessons you need to be taught until you hit the dips. Like be thankful when you're doing well, and be thankful when you hit the dip too, because both of those things is what creates the math equation to get you to the next step above. Absolutely. It's all necessary.
Yeah. Well, hey, I appreciate you, man. Just so you know, from a friendship perspective, I know we didn't have to interact a lot yet, and I'm sure there's a lot going to be more of it. But people are watching, like myself. I'm a sucker for good. If I find something that people are doing, regardless of who they are, like if it makes us better or makes me better, I'll try to implement it. So I've implemented a lot of things from you. Thanks for being true to who you are and what you're doing. I think it will. It does help people, even if those who you surrounded or those who pay attention quietly, not saying anything. So, and jumping on this podcast, I appreciate you too, man. It's nothing to do with like running the podcast. I just want to hear stories of people and put it out there, just so people that in the beginning stages like you and I were now could tap into something and hopefully pull something for themselves and use one or two nuggets.
I love it, man. I really do. And I love watching you grow, switch out there in California. I always see all the cool things that you're doing, and I gather a lot of ideas from you and other people that I watch too. So right back at you. I really appreciate you inviting me on here and just talking. And there's a lot of cool stories from a lot of people. So I'm sure you're going to have a lot of damn fun doing that too.
Thanks, man. Last advice, if you could give somebody who is an upside of it yet but has not seen the potential, what would you suggest for them?
Just not to stop. I mean, how many, like you probably know yourself, how many people in this industry took a month or two before they got their first deal? Like some of the biggest names in this industry had like the hardest struggles before they made it to become like a true legend in their craft. So my thought is, no matter how bad you're doing, just keep going until you find some type of success. Because the last thing you want to do is stop doing something on an L, because it just kills your self-confidence, right? And everything within your self-confidence has a lot to do with the win. So no matter how bad you're doing, even if you're not going to be in this space forever, just keep going until you get a win, and then you can make your final decision. But never quit on an L.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that the loss sometimes is the biggest kill of potential, right?
Yeah.
Because people lose too fast, and then all of a sudden they realize that either they can or cannot make it. Because some people don't recognize, like, shoot, if I made a couple of corrections, I would have been there, and they stop progressing. So I appreciate you saying that. But anyways, Bret, I appreciate you, man, for doing this. And where can we find you online so people can follow your path, your journey?
Yeah, I'm a loudmouth on Instagram, so you can find me on Instagram at Bret with 1 T, Nowell. And then all of our other stuff is on United Solar, which is UNTD Solar.
Yeah, so if you guys are looking to work with Brad, obviously he's in Arizona. I assume you guys are going to be expanding in other places as well, but we'll follow your journey, and congrats on your growth, man.
Hey, I appreciate it a ton, dude. A lot. More than you probably know.
Thanks, Brad. That means a lot.
Say hi to Instagram for me.
Woo! Hey, see you guys. Appreciate you, brother.
All right, have a great day, brother.
See you, man.
Take care.